frozen mother, Bigfoot, begged for shelter. The ending brought tears to the world. Before we begin, take a moment to comment your city. Where are you watching from today? And when the story ends, don't forget to rate it from 0 to 10. Now settle into a quiet place, breathe deep, and let the whispers of the Wild West carry you into tonight's tale. Winter had draped the Canadian forest in a thick, icy blanket. The wind whistled through the pines, rattling against the little wooden cabin, sending eerie echoes across the blizzard. Nancy Taylor, a 62-year-old widow, was no stranger to solitude and silence. She sat by the fire hands, clutching a warm woolen shawl, eyes tracing the dance of flames flickering in the darkness. And then a knock at the door, heavy, deliberate, unlike any branch or gust of wind. Nancy froze. The door, which usually only opened to the storm, now faced a colossal presence. A mother. Bigfoot, trembling, cradling her small child, stood in the snow, her eyes silently pleading. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to hold its breath. Fear, compassion, and a single choice lingering. Would she open the door or close it forever? The woman who lived with silence. At the close of the 19th century, deep in the snow-covered forests of northern Canada, Nancy Taylor lived alone in a small wooden cabin nestled against the thick pines. At 62, a widow, she was accustomed to solitude, to the whistle of wind through the cracks in her walls, and the faint, lingering scent of pine smoke that drifted through the cabin whenever the fire crackled. Nancy's days unfolded like worn pages of an old book, rising at dawn, adding logs to the stove, cooking a pot of hot porridge, carefully arranging her supplies. The flickering fire in the hearth did more than warm her body. It was the only light against the emptiness and cold that pressed in from outside. Beyond her cabin, snow blanketed the ground so thickly that old trails had disappeared. No footsteps, no movement, only the wind and the harsh silence of winter. Stories from the distant town spoke of enormous shapes wandering through the forest with eyes glowing amber in the midst of snowstorms. Bigfoot. Long ago, Nancy might have smiled softly at such tales, but on these long white nights, the stories were a stark reminder of the wildness beyond her door, where human and nature met in cold and solitude. That night, the blizzard roared fiercer than any Nancy had ever known. The wind lashed at the cabin, snow slammed against the windows in heavy sheets, and the sound echoed like the cries of the deep forest. Nancy added more logs to the stove hands, gripping her woolen shawl, heart tightening at the raw power of the storm. And then there came a knock at the door. Not hurried, not aggressive, slow, deliberate, and unlike anything she had heard before. Nancy froze, her heart racing. In that brief moment, she knew this was no gust of wind, no falling branch, but a being she had never imagined. The door opened, and through the swirling white, a massive figure appeared. A mother, Bigfoot, shoulders bowed beneath the thick snow, cradling a trembling child in her arms. Her eyes met Nancy's, not a word, only a silent plea. The air seemed to freeze around them, fear, compassion, and a single choice hanging in the balance. Would she open the door or leave it closed between the cold of the storm and the chill of loneliness? Part 1. The Knock of Fate. The blizzard raged outside the cabin, whipping snow against the wooden roof and sending thick layers tumbling onto the porch, with a soft crackle mingling with the occasional snap of breaking branches. Nancy Taylor sat by the fire, clutching her warm woolen shawl, eyes following the flames as they danced in the darkness. Every sound felt like a heartbeat echoing through the solitude she had grown accustomed to over the years. Then came a knock at the door. Heavy, slow, and unusual. At first, Nancy furrowed her brow, thinking it was just the storm or a branch striking the window. But it came a second time, steady, deliberate, like a plea without words. Her heart raced, a mixture of fear and curiosity flooding her senses. Tales of Bigfoot she had once heard in town. The massive figure's amber eyes glowing in the night, fierce and mysterious, rushed into her mind. Yet now, standing before her, reality outweighed the stories framed by snow and icy wind. She rose and walked to the door, fingers tracing the cold wooden frame. Her hands trembled, not from the cold, but from the uneasy blend of anticipation and apprehension. Holding her lantern, the flickering light danced across the cabin walls, highlighting the thick snow piled around the threshold. And then, as she cracked the door open just slightly, the scene before her stopped her heart. A colossal figure, snow-covered from head to shoulders bowed with fatigue, cradled a small, trembling child. The mother Bigfoot stood silently, not growling, not aggressive. Only her eyes, wide and desperate, spoke volumes, seemingly entrusting the life of her child into Nancy's hands. Snow fell from their fur, melting into small puddles on the wooden floor. Nancy could barely breathe, emotions swirling within her: fear, compassion, curiosity. For a moment, she wanted to slam the door shut. Stories of dangerous creatures echoed in her mind. They could attack at any moment. Yet the mother's eyes dispelled every tale. There was something in that weighty silence that made Nancy understand this was not a threat. This was a being desperate to save her child. The little gestures of the mother brought Nancy to a quiet ache. Massive hands holding the child, tight body trembling, backbent, shielding her little one. The child's faint whimpers were fragile notes against the storm, not the growls of a monster, but a fragile cry for survival, a plea for protection. Nancy drew a deep breath, smelling the pinewood smoke, feeling the steam rising from her boiling pot and the bone-deep chill sneaking into every corner. She stepped back, gripping the doorframe firmly, and made her first decision. Instead of fear, she filled the moment with compassion. A slow sigh escaped her, and she whispered to herself, "If not me, then no one will save them." With rare calm, Nancy opened the door wider, allowing the mother Bigfoot to step inside. The mother bowed her head, shoulders, brushing the frame, snow falling in flakes across the floor. The child nestled into her arms, trembling eyes shut, letting out quiet murmurs. Nancy quickly laid down 2 thick wool blankets near the fire and placed warm water in a small bowl. She kept just enough distance to avoid startling them, yet close enough that the glow of the fire and the warmth of human presence could melt the icy chill. The mother sat down, curling around her child, eyes still fixed on Nancy, unwavering. The child reached a tentative hand for the bowl. The mother lifted it, letting the child drink first. Nancy observed every small detail, the way the mother gave of herself to her child, held the little one close, each breath a struggle for survival. No longer the monster of storybooks, she was a mother, helpless, yet instinctively protective. Time passed slowly. Outside, the blizzard screamed, snow blanketing everything. Inside, the fire flickered, creating a warm oasis in the midst of cold and wilderness. Nancy sat opposite, watching every breath, every movement, every fragile moment of life the mother and child found in her cabin. Fear gradually gave way to empathy, then to a silent connection, wordless, between human and legendary creature. That night, no words were exchanged, yet every gesture became a shared language: life, protection, compassion. Nancy realized that amidst the storm and the wild kindness was the true fire that sustained life, a bridge between 2 worlds that seemed impossibly apart. And as the blizzard continued, Nancy understood one thing: from this moment forward, her life would never be the same, and the 2 beings before her, mother and child, had found a temporary refuge, warm and safe, at least for tonight. A moment lingered as Nancy watched the mother bow her head, trembling, holding her child close, no words spoken. A quiet understanding bridging species, tense yet gentle, opening the first wave of emotion for the audience. Part 2. The silhouette at the door. The wind and snow lashed against the cabin. The door stood ajar. Snow scattered across the wooden floor, and the firelight cast flickering streaks across the room. Nancy stepped forward, feeling an emptiness inside her amid the storm. Her eyes met a massive silhouette, fur dusted in gray-white snow, broad shoulders slumped with exhaustion. Cradled in its arms was a trembling child, small eyes wide and stunned, chilled to the bone. The mother Bigfoot did not growl, did not threaten, only her gaze pleading, desperate, worried. Each breath she drew was ragged, heavy in the cold air. Nancy froze, heart-pounding fear and compassion interwoven in her chest. The blizzard seemed intent on swallowing everything outside, but in that moment there was a special silence, the silence between 2 lives measuring each other. Nancy realized this was no enemy. This was a mother fighting to keep her child alive. She held her breath, placing a trembling hand on the doorframe. A choice waited to open the door and let in warmth and light, or to preserve her own safety. Part 3. The decision to open her heart. Nancy drew a deep, steady breath. The icy chill seemed to melt slightly as she felt the fragility of life before her. Even a small act could change a fate. She lifted her hand, pushing the door open just enough for the mother and child to step inside. Snow tumbled onto the wooden floor, and the warmth from the fire began to seep into the damp fur of the creatures. The mother bowed her head slightly, a silent gesture of gratitude, and stepped slowly into the cabin. The child nestled against her, lifting tiny eyes toward Nancy, for the first time curious, yet not afraid. Nancy quickly laid 2 thick wool blankets near the hearth and poured warm water into a small pan. The mother glanced at her, then lowered the child between the blankets, wrapping her massive body protectively around the little one. That unspoken gesture said everything: maternal love, trust, and the instinct to survive. Outside, the storm still howled, but the cabin had become a refuge, not only for the body, but for the spirit. A quiet bond had formed 3 lives, different species, now sharing a heartbeat, surviving the harsh winter night together. Nancy stood silently, realizing fear had given way to empathy. In the quiet sharing of that moment, a spark of humanity blazed brightly in her heart. Part 4. The shared fire. Inside the small cabin, the fire flickered, casting dancing streaks across the wooden walls and floor. Outside, the blizzard raged on, blanketing everything in white. Nancy bent down, carefully placing the pan of warm water near the mother Bigfoot and her child. Her hands still trembled from the cold, but inside her, a warm determination spread. She scooped a bowl of coarse porridge from the pot, steam curling upward, floating gently in the air. The mother Bigfoot leaned closer, sniffing the aroma, her eyes lighting up slightly. Then she tilted her head toward the child. The gesture spoke clearly. "You first, my little one." The small child slowly reached for the bowl, taking tiny sips of porridge. Nancy watched, feeling warmth spreading through her chest. The mother never touched the bowl herself. She simply shielded her child, holding them close, protective and tender. That simple act revealed a profound truth: maternal love crosses every boundary. The monsters from the stories Nancy had heard now seemed closer, more relatable than any creature she had imagined. The scene was silent, yet overflowing with emotion. The wind outside roared, as if trying to drown everything, but inside the cabin, the warmth from the fire and the quiet acts of care bound the 3 lives together. Nancy smiled softly, whispering to herself, "Fear is only a curtain. Behind it lies a compassion we've never known." The storm still howled, snow piling against the windows, but inside a spark of humanity blazed, warming not just the body, but the heart. In that moment, life was shared between Nancy and the mother Bigfoot, a silent but powerful connection that needed no words. Part 5. The vanishing boundary. The blizzard still raged. Outside, the wind whipped against the cabin in relentless gusts, carrying hard snowflakes that erased the lines between trees and open space, covering everything in white. Yet inside, the warmth from the flickering fire created a different world. A world where 3 lives, a human and 2 legendary creatures, shared the same space, quiet but brimming with unspoken emotion. Nancy stood by the hearth, hands still trembling from the cold, but a new feeling had risen within her. There was no longer fear, no longer the anxiety she had felt when she first saw the mother Bigfoot at the door. Instead came a deep connection, a compassion that transcended every boundary of species. She gazed into the mother's large, dark eyes and saw not a monster, but a heart full of love, a mother's soul fighting with every ounce of strength to protect her small child. Across the cabin, the little Bigfoot sat huddled beneath the blankets, eyes curious and cautious as it observed Nancy. It had never seen a human before, but its initial wariness slowly shifted to curiosity and trust. Tiny fingers brushed the wooden floor, tentatively exploring this new space. Nancy smiled softly, remaining still, letting silence weave a quiet thread of connection. In that moment, Nancy felt the line between human and creature dissolve, leaving only life and the instinct to protect it. Her heart grew heavy, not with fear, but with understanding. A deep awareness of survival instincts, maternal love, and the sharing of life in the harshest moments filled her chest. Lowering her voice, Nancy walked to the small table, scooped more warm water, and brought it closer to the mother. The mother tilted her head to acknowledge her, then bent to let her child drink first. That unspoken gesture spoke volumes. You first, my child, then me. Nancy sensed the sacrifice, the resilience, and a quiet strength beyond imagination. A few soft giggles escaped the child as it sipped the water. The mother nodded gently, watching with eyes both tender and stern, protective and instructive. Nancy felt her heartbeat align with theirs, as if the three of them had become a single entity, surviving together through care and compassion. Time slowed. The storm still roared outside, but inside the cabin stretched into a sanctuary. Nancy prepared spoonfuls of hot porridge for the mother, who now leaned slightly, taking just enough for herself after caring for her child. Every movement was deliberate, careful, and filled with meaning. Nancy sat down with a sip of hot tea, watching the two creatures before her. She wondered if anyone else could understand this feeling. A being usually known only in legend had become a companion, an object of empathy and humanity. She realized that boundaries of species were illusions. What was real was humanity itself. Later, the mother set the child down to explore, reaching tentatively toward Nancy. That gentle moment carried quiet power, a message that trust and connection could flourish even between worlds that seemed so opposite. Nancy nodded, smiling, remaining silent. Words were unnecessary, only eyes and actions were needed. The blizzard continued to howl outside, yet the cabin had transformed into a kingdom of life and care. The fire blazed brighter, reflecting off the snow-dusted fur of the mother, creating shifting light and shadow across the walls, cinematic, almost magical, yet warm. Night fell, and the cabin grew dark except for the flickering firelight. Nancy did not sleep, watching the mother curl around her child, each heavy breath steady and measured. The mother shivered sweat mingling with the melting snow on her fur, but never released the child. Nancy understood that this was the deepest moment of maternal love beyond any boundary or prejudice. In the following days, the blizzard showed no sign of easing, but Nancy had prepared better. Food was portioned carefully, water always warm, and the fire kept steady. The mother gradually trusted her more, watching silently, eyes softening with gratitude and less caution. The little child recovered slowly. It began to babble, giggle softly, and occasionally reach out to touch Nancy's hand. Nancy smiled, feeling life revive and trust build, little by little. The three of them were no longer strangers, but a temporary family surviving through shared care and compassion. One evening, as Nancy added more logs to the fire, the mother bowed her head, broad shoulders trembling. Nancy noticed silent tears falling through the thick fur. No sobs, no complaints, just shivering in silence. A tear of gratitude, of exhaustion, of hope. Nancy did not move closer, did nothing else. Simply observing was enough to understand together they were enduring the storm, sharing life. The next morning, the blizzard had not fully lifted. Snow still blanketed the world outside, but the cabin was a safe, warm, human place. Nancy prepared another bowl of porridge, and once again the mother gave it to her child, first clear proof of instinct and sacrifice. As the days passed and the storm finally subsided, the boundary between Nancy and the mother Bigfoot had vanished completely. No fear, no hesitation remained, only respect and understanding. 3 lives, 1 human, and 2 legendary creatures now lived in temporary harmony, bound by maternal love, compassion, and survival. Nancy realized something profound in moments of danger and isolation. Humans and creatures were no longer separate. All that existed was life, protection, and sharing. The story she had lived might not be believed by anyone else, but for her, the meaning of compassion and maternal love had been engraved deeply in her heart. When the mother Bigfoot finally carried her child toward the door, snow white everywhere, Nancy stood watching. The mother's eyes were no longer desperate but full of gratitude. A single look was enough for Nancy to understand that her small act had saved 2 lives, and had healed her own lonely heart. Once they disappeared into the snow-covered forest, Nancy returned to the hearth. Silence returned to the cabin, but this time it was a warm silence filled with peace and hope. She looked at the melted snow on the floor and whispered to herself, "In the fiercest storm, compassion is the fire that keeps life alive." Sitting by the fire, gazing out at the endless white, Nancy felt the connection she had witnessed. No words were needed. No proof required, only an open heart and a kind act, and all boundaries dissolved. Her story with the mother Bigfoot and her child would forever stand as a testament that compassion transcends every limit and hope can bloom even in the harshest of blizzards. Part 6. Tears in the dark night had slowly fallen, but outside the cabin the blizzard still howled. Nancy sat by the hearth, hands trembling from the cold, yet her mind was fully alert. She didn't move, didn't speak. She simply watched the mother Bigfoot curl around her child. The mother shivered, her broad shoulders rising and falling with each heavy breath. Sweat mingled with the melting snow on her thick fur, yet she never released her child. In the flickering firelight, Nancy saw silent tears slipping down the mother's fur. No sobs, no complaints, just trembling, the quiet shivers of exhaustion, desperation, and love. Nancy felt a deep understanding she had never experienced before. In that moment, it was no longer a human and a creature, it was two mothers, one of flesh and bone, one legendary, both enduring fear, despair, and the instinct to protect their young. She closed her eyes, drawing a deep breath, letting her heartbeat sync with the mother's heavy breathing. Every tear, every breath, every gesture told a story of maternal love, sacrifice, and survival. Nancy realized that beings of another species also had hearts, knew love, and needed to be understood. Silence enveloped the cabin, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the whistle of the wind outside. No words were necessary. Empathy had already been exchanged. Nancy felt a connection beyond time, beyond species, a bond so profound it could not be broken. All night, Nancy did not sleep. She simply sat by the fire, observing, protecting. She knew this moment was precious, a moment where life, love, and humanity intertwined, igniting a warm flame in the midst of the raging storm. Part 7. The child's first smile. On the third day of the blizzard, snow still blanketed the cabin outside, but inside the atmosphere had softened. The little Bigfoot had regained strength, eyes bright and full of curiosity. It slowly reached out, touching the wooden floor, and then cautiously extended a hand toward Nancy. Nancy saw the child's first smile, a tentative, awkward grin, yet brimming with hope. Her heart melted. This moment was not just physical recovery, but an emotional rebirth, a testament that compassion, sharing, and empathy could create miracles. The mother Bigfoot stood nearby, watchful yet softer, looking at her child with pride and gratitude. She bent down, letting the child explore the space, and for the first time, it was unafraid. Its eyes followed Nancy's every movement, as if to understand that she was a friend, a bringer of life and safety. Nancy softened her voice gently, saying, "Don't be afraid, little one. I won't hurt you." Though the child could not understand her words, it felt the gentleness, patience, and warmth in her tone. It moved closer, sitting beside Nancy, lightly touching her hand, then letting out a small laugh. The atmosphere in the cabin shifted completely. The blizzard outside remained fierce, but inside it was a warm world where three lives survived together, sharing warmth and slowly building trust. The child's smile marked a profound realization for Nancy. The boundary between human and creature had vanished. Only life trust and maternal love remained. The mother sat by the hearth, cradling her child, massive hands shielding and protecting. Nancy sat opposite, watching, not interfering, but not ignoring. She felt clearly that every small gesture, every act of sharing had forged a silent, unbreakable bond among them. That night, the cabin was a sanctuary not only for the body, but for the soul. Nancy felt life reviving, not just in the child, but within herself. A 62-year-old widow, long accustomed to solitude, suddenly felt hope, warmth, and healing in her heart. In the days that followed, the blizzard continued, but Nancy was no longer alone. Each morning she prepared food and warm water for the two creatures, realizing that living meant sharing understanding and loving beyond every boundary. The moment the little Bigfoot smiled at Nancy for the first time would remain forever etched in her memory, a smile symbolizing hope, the miracle of compassion and faith in the survival of life against all odds. Part 8. The Weight of Farewell. The blizzard had finally begun to recede. Morning light filtered through the snow-laden trees, casting sparkling silver streaks across the endless white ground. The air was calm, a stark contrast to the raging storm of the previous night. The cabin remained warm, the hearth glowing steadily, but in Nancy's chest, a heavy feeling rose the moment of parting had come. The mother Bigfoot stood by the door, cradling her child, massive hands holding tightly as if to cling to all the warm days they had shared. The child huddled gently against its mother, eyes wide with curiosity, yet fearful of losing the human who had brought warmth and food. Nancy stepped closer, leaning down to place her hand on the still warm blanket. She whispered softly, her voice deep but gentle, "Be safe, both of you. Survive. I will always remember you." The mother Bigfoot turned her head, eyes deep and expressive, speaking the only language they shared, gratitude and respect. A long silence followed the three lives, looking at each other, needing no words, feeling only with their hearts. Nancy knew she could not keep them any longer. Beyond the forest, the mother's presence could bring danger, and she did not want the two lives in her care to face further risk. Her heart ached, but the decision was right. Letting go was also an act of love. The mother lowered her child near Nancy one last time. The child lifted a small hand, brushing lightly against Nancy's as if to say, "Thank you for saving me." Nancy smiled, tears welling in her eyes. That small gesture contained everything: trust, maternal love, and compassion that transcended every boundary. Nancy watched as the mother lifted her child and stepped out the door. Snow stretched endlessly, yet their footprints marked the fresh blanket of white, engraving the moment of survival and the bond that had formed. The mother's final gaze left Nancy's heart tight: gratitude, love, and a farewell without words. Part 9. The Last Look. Before stepping into the deep forest, the mother Bigfoot paused, turning her back toward Nancy. Her large dark eyes held the depth of gratitude, exhaustion, and the lingering fear she had overcome. The moment stretched heavy with emotion, yet no words were spoken. Nancy understood those eyes were a silent symphony: thankfulness for being saved, maternal love preserved, and the trust between human and creature now fully formed. Beneath the snow, the Bigfoot footprints pressed into the ground, reminding Nancy that a connection had occurred, one that would remain in memory forever. No one else had witnessed this moment, but Nancy knew that maternal love, compassion, and survival had transcended all boundaries. She stepped to the door, taking a deep breath. There was no fear, only bittersweet gratitude and completeness. The blizzard had passed, but the moment would remain etched in her heart forever. Part 10. The Silence Remains. The cabin returned to absolute silence. Only the crackle of the fire and the gentle creak of wooden boards under warmth remained. Nancy sat down, gazing at the melted snow on the floor, evidence that the mother and child had once been there. She placed her hand on the floor, closing her eyes, whispering, "I have witnessed something no one would believe. Yet it is real. Compassion transcends all boundaries, and hope always survives." Nancy felt a strange peace, no longer alone, no longer fearful. Her heart was full of hope, faith, and healing. The cabin remained a physical refuge, but now it was also an oasis for the soul, a place where the memories of kindness and maternal love would endure. Outside, the forest was still snow-covered and silent. The storm had passed, yet the traces of humanity and maternal love remained, proof that even in the fiercest storms, compassion is the fire that keeps life alive. Nancy exhaled, a soft smile spreading across her face. The journey had ended, but the emotions and lessons remained. Eternal fear can transform into empathy. Differences can become connection, and acts of kindness can save countless lives. The story closed in meaningful silence. The fire continued to burn, casting flickering light across the cabin walls, and Nancy's heart, aged but hopeful, was renewed alive with the warmth of the human and legendary bonds she had witnessed. The fire of compassion. The cabin had fallen into quiet. The wind and snow had receded, but the echoes of the storm still lingered on the old wooden walls. Nancy sat by the hearth, her hand resting lightly on the table, eyes following the place where the mother Bigfoot and her child had stood. The melting snow on the floor reminded her of the moments that had just passed: the knock at the door in the night, the pleading gaze, the trembling tears, and the child's very first smile. Nancy closed her eyes, feeling a sense of peace spread through her. She knew that even though they had left, the bond that had formed still lived in her heart. There was no fear, no loneliness, only hope, compassion, and faith in life itself. She stood, taking a deep, slow breath. The light from the hearth flickered across the walls, dancing along the wooden planks. In that moment, Nancy felt as if the snow-covered forest outside had paused, silent and reverent, witnessing a quiet miracle unfold. The long, lonely nights she had endured, the empty hours, were now soothed by the simple act of kindness that had saved lives and healed hearts, both human and creature. She smiled softly, whispering to herself, "No matter how harsh the world outside, the fire of compassion will always burn. Just open your heart, just one small act of kindness, and all boundaries can disappear." Nancy looked out the window where the snow stretched endlessly, the morning light glinting on its surface, a gentle reminder that hope always exists and life will find a way to endure even the fiercest storms. She turned back to the hearth, watching the fire dance across her aged yet expressive face. Nancy realized that her story, though few might ever believe, it was a living testament to the power of compassion, maternal love, and shared care. A profound sense of serenity washed over her. She no longer felt alone, for her heart carried the memories of the mother Bigfoot and her child, two lives that had survived the storm together, shared warmth, and understood each other. Nancy closed her eyes and exhaled softly. The fire in the cabin warmed not only her body but her soul. She smiled, knowing that no matter how harsh the vast world outside might be, compassion would remain a flame that never goes out. Outside, the forest lay silent beneath the white snow. No footsteps remained. No shadows moved, only the traces left behind. Yet the memories and lessons lived on in Nancy's heart. The story concluded in meaningful silence, a deep peace, enduring hope, and a timeless human message. In the fiercest storms of life, open your heart. Even the smallest act of kindness can save and heal. The fire of compassion will always burn, transcending every boundary. Nancy sat there quietly, watching the fire, smiling through tears. A harsh winter had ended, but the story of life, maternal love, and compassion would live on forever in her heart, and perhaps in the heart of anyone willing to open theirs.